State Department heightening its warning to Americans traveling to Mexico, where violent crimes are on the rise, even in tourist destinations.
Haley Winslow live in LAX.
He's sharing his story for the very first time and believes that's why he's still here, to help others. Because really, there is no other explanation as to how he was able to survive all that he went through in Mexico.
I'll never forget that feeling. It was the scariest feeling in the entire world, but you're just done.
Do not travel. We encourage Americans to heed that advice.
Dustan Jackson lived in the United States and visited Cancun, Mexico for a fun vacation with his wife, but it ended up being his worst nightmare, leaving him with a lifelong trauma. A quick run to the nearby gas station for a daily commodity landed him in the grips of Mexico's brutal kidnappers, some of whom were connected to ruthless cartels that ravage the cities of Mexico every day. The gruesome attack left far more than a few scars on his body. Jackson made it out alive, but the memories of this incident will haunt him for the rest of his life. What happened on that fateful day? How did he escape from the kidnapper? And most importantly, who was behind this kidnapping? Stay tuned as we try to uncover some of the information in this video. It all started with a perfect vacation. 36-year-old Dustan Jackson and his wife had a wonderful Valentine's Day celebration in Cancun in February 2023 and were waiting for their flight home to Salt Lake City. On the day of their return flight, just a few hours before boarding, Jackson decided to get some chewing tobacco. He got in a cab and visited a nearby gas station, which did not have the product in stock. Disappointed, he asked the cab driver to take him to a bigger grocery store. The cab driver took him to another building and told him that it was a grocery store. Jackson never suspected the cab driver. He got out of the cab and walked into the establishment, and that's when he saw darkness all around. The cab driver had kidnapped him.
He says the taxi driver, who later charged a few grand to his credit card, kidnaps him.
He says there's going to be just a grocery store. So I get out and I'm like, okay, as I'm walking in, then boom, lights out. Next thing I know, I am waking up in a ditch.
Jackson had left to get chewing tobacco at 10 o'clock in the morning, but when he woke up hours later, it was already dark outside, and it was apparent that he had been brutally hurt after being mugged. The cab driver supposedly charged a few $1,000s to his credit card. The kidnapper had jabbed his foot to try to limit his movement, but he was unsuccessful because the bottom of Jackson's foot was still attached to the rest like a flap. The left side of his body had been severely injured, indicating that the kidnapper tried to ensure that Jackson would not make it out alive. Then, he dumped Jackson in a ditch.
They feed off the entire bottom of my foot. So they went to cut my Achilles tendon and they missed. And instead of hitting it, they hit the bottom of the foot and then my foot just flapped around. They were trying to cut my tendons and leave me for dead.
After regaining consciousness, Jackson fought through unbearable pain and crawled out into the dark streets. He didn't know Spanish. He spent hours roaming around the streets screaming for help, but no one came to his aid. Reportedly, even the cops had turned him away. The first cops that I ran into, I swear it was a police station at least. They told me to go away, he said in an interview. Jackson then found a tarp and crawled under it, the pain almost paralyzing him. He knew that he had no other option but to wait for death to claim him. He was under the tarp for uncounted hours and had almost given up on his life. But after some time, he found a small ray of hope, beckoning him to get out of there and seek help. He remembered his wife and children and knew that he had to survive.
Because at this point, this is when, however long I was laying there, pretty much just waiting to die, something inside of me, that strength came to me and said, you got family, you got kids, get up.
Jackson kept going. Hundreds of people walked past him and no one offered to help. But eventually, a female police officer tended to his wounds and helped him reach the airport. Jackson wondered why she hadn't driven him to the hospital instead of the airport, but believed that this move had actually worked to his advantage. Hospital authorities could have detained him and involved the police, which could further complicate the entire issue. Why didn't she take me to the hospital? I don't know. Some of the horror stories I've heard, I'm glad that she didn't, because I could have been stuck down there. Who knows, says Jackson. But the rest of his journey home wasn't easy either. He faced many more challenges at the airport. He didn't have access to a phone and didn't know Spanish. He had no way of contacting his wife or family. His wife had supposedly left for the US without him. His wounded and battered state also wasn't creating a good impression among the passers-by. According to him, he was looking like a homeless person. Jackson was able to get a wheelchair at the airport, but because he didn't have a valid plane ticket anymore, the authorities took it away from him, leaving him on the ground. He went back to scrambling on the floor and asking for help from the other passengers, but no one spared a glance in his direction. Eventually, an international traveler called Kayla Jackson noticed him and decided to help. Jackson calls her his guardian angel. She listened to his story and helped him contact his wife.
Hundreds of people walked by, not one person. And finally, this lady from Africa, her flight got canceled. That's why she stopped.
Jackson's wife transferred money for a hotel and a new flight, and Kayla checked him into a hotel. As his passport and bags were at the airport, he had no difficulty flying back home. Dustan Jackson was taken for treatment immediately. He had sustained severe nerve damage and had to spend months in the hospital praying for recovery and to return to normal life. Alongside the foot injury, he also had a broken shoulder. Doctors spent months trying to fix it, but after 4 surgeries, they had to resort to installing artificial joints inside to support the frame. His shoulder isn't real anymore, and the doctors suspect that he broke it when the kidnapper threw him out of the cab.
My shoulder's completely fake now. There is no more real bone in there. And the doctors think it's from them throwing me out of the vehicle, probably.
He can no longer enjoy the activities with his kids that he used to, but he's just happy to be alive and to spend time with his children. Jackson believes that he survived miraculously. He had lost all the will to live after the initial attack, and coming back from there still feels like a dream to him. He's definitely not taking this lightly and is making the most of his new life that he's been gifted.
He can no longer play catch with his daughter or swing a golf club with his son, but knows he miraculously survived for a reason.
I take the little times in life. I don't take them for granted anymore. You just don't know what life's going to bring you. So never give up. Keep going. Everybody has a purpose.
Jackson, indeed, is using this opportunity to tell his story to millions in the hopes of shedding some light on the brutality faced by many within the borders of Mexico. Hundreds and thousands of tourists travel to Mexico every year, and if they're not careful, they can also fall prey to these kidnappers who have no humanity. Jackson hasn't been able to return to his job, but is trying his luck at YouTube.
Good morning, guys. How are you doing today? Hey, you guys have probably seen the news or seen some things out there right now about myself. My name is Dustan Jackson. I was mugged in Mexico and left for dead.
He's writing a book on his experience in Cancun and raising money through crowdfunding to turn his story into a documentary. He believes that this will help many people out there. He also has plans to start a podcast on the topic.
We are going to be starting a podcast. So the reason that I kind of wanted to jump on here and talk to you guys is cool story. We're going to be starting a podcast for people that have to go over adversity, challenges in their lifestyle, things that have really affected them.
Despite being the victim of this horrendous crime, Jackson didn't file an official complaint at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. However, the news reached the government, and they expressed their concerns. Meanwhile, Cancun authorities launched an investigation to find the perpetrator. Although it's really disheartening that they didn't respond this positively when the incident actually took place. As mentioned earlier, Mexican airport authorities had taken Jackson's wheelchair away when he couldn't show a valid ticket. When asked about this incident, the police team at Cancun airport claimed that they weren't aware of any such incident and didn't have any knowledge of the attack. This only goes to show their lack of integrity and accountability in dire situations such as this. This is not the first time the Mexican police or authorities have shown reluctance to take action against the ongoing brutality and random kidnappings. Thousands of people go missing in Mexico every year, and the families of the victims never really get justice. As of March 2023, around 112,000 people are reported missing in the country, and no one knows if they will ever be found. It's not only the locals. Many tourists have been victims of cartel wars and kidnappings while vacationing in Mexico. In March 2023, 4 U.S. citizens drove into Tamaulipas. One of them was scheduled for plastic surgery. After they entered the city, they landed in the middle of gunfire. They were abducted immediately, as seen in security footage.
Mexico, here we come.
The warning comes after a deadly incident earlier this month, when authorities say 4 Americans driving from South Carolina into northeast Mexico were mistakenly targeted by cartel gunmen. Video showing their violent abduction after authorities say the cartel members opened fire.
All 4 of them were later found in a rural area, but unfortunately, 2 of the friends had died from bullet wounds. The other 2 that survived returned home, but with memories of an event that changed their lives forever.
2 of the 4 longtime friends were killed. The remaining 2 survivors returning home just last week.
Tamaulipas authorities called the incident an unfortunate case of the wrong people being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They suspect that the group had fallen into the middle of a cartel war and became casualties as the cartel members supposedly mistook them for rival gang members. The authorities claimed that the cartel wars had reportedly gone down in the past few years, but due to one cartel entering the area to seize the narcotics business from their rivals, the scenario had turned grim once again. The honest confessions and analysis of Mexican law enforcement authorities is appreciable, but it's also upsetting to see how they've accepted the scenario. At this point, no one really knows how they can reinstill peace and justice in those states. A recent report claims that around 550 Americans are reported missing in Mexico as of March 2023, many of whom possibly turned into victims of the Mexican cartel wars and mindless kidnappings.
Currently, more than 550 Americans are reported missing in Mexico.
In the same month of March 2023, 2 sisters and their female friend entered Mexico from Texas, and all 3 went missing. Their family and friends began looking for them, and an official missing report came out after 2 weeks.
Authorities say 2 sisters and their friend are still nowhere to be found after they crossed the border more than 2 weeks ago from the small city of Pinitas, Texas, into northeast Mexico.
In June 2022, law enforcement retrieved the lifeless bodies of 2 Canadian citizens from an apartment in Playa del Carmen with deep wounds in their throats. In October 2021, 2 female tourists lost their lives after they were caught in the middle of cartel gunfire in Tulum. One of them was a German and the other a U.S. citizen. As the gang members opened fire in the streets, a few other European tourists ended up wounded as they were dining outside of an eatery.
Images of sunny skies and sandy beaches shattered in Tulum, Mexico, after 2 tourists were caught in the crossfire of a shootout earlier this week. Authorities say 2 women are now dead, one from Germany, the other from India. Local reports say one of the women was a travel blogger.
The German travel advisory imposed a travel restriction for Mexico after this incident. These brutal events are just a few of the countless reports that have definitely impacted travel plans for the Americans. Mexico is a very popular tourist spot, especially for a U.S. citizen, and thousands travel there throughout the year. While most return home safely, the unfortunate incidents still can't be disregarded.
Passenger volume between the U.S. and Mexico this January 2023, actually up 24% compared to the same month in 2019. That's a larger rise than any other international destination. Mexico is a true favorite of American tourists.
Due to these numbers and the recent events, U.S. authorities were compelled to adopt stricter policies for their travelers. In 2023, the U.S. State Department imposed a travel advisory for citizens who wish to visit Mexico for vacations.
The travel advisory for Tamaulipas State remains at level 4. Do not travel. We encourage Americans to heed that advice.
They have asked visitors to be extra cautious when visiting Cancun, Cabo, and if possible, reconsider visiting popular tourist destinations such as Puerto Vallarta. They have imposed a do not travel advisory on 6 Mexican states: Sinaloa, Tamaulipas, Zacatecas, Colima, Guerrero, and Michoacan.
A strict do not travel alert posted to 6 additional Mexican states, all due to an increased risk of crime and kidnapping, including a high level of drug cartel violence.
If the criminal activities and kidnappings in Mexico aren't brought under control, no one can tell when the travel restrictions will be relaxed. Victims like Dustan Jackson are fighting their trauma every day, but doing everything in their power to let the world know of the atrocities they faced at the hands of those ruthless culprits. If their cries of caution can't change this nation for the better, nothing else can. Guns, violence, and narcotics. These have turned into the reality of today's Mexico. Once the country was a popular destination for travelers. It has scenic places and mouth-watering cuisine, but all of those are overshadowed by the tales of brutality, bloodshed, and gang rivalries. If the authorities of the country can't ensure safety for the tourists, the world will soon be forced to turn their backs on Mexico, even the good things the country has to offer. Do you have any stories about tourist kidnappings in Mexico? Have your close ones faced any such incident while on vacation? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video to show your support, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell to get notified of future uploads. See you soon with the next exciting story.